We're excited to announce that our very own podcasting platform, Zencastr, has become a new sponsor to the show. Check out the podcast's discount link in our show notes and stay tuned for why we love using Zen for the podcast.
You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
Hello out there in Archaeology Podcast land. This is Dr. Alan Garfinkel. I'm the president and founder of the California Rock Art Foundation. And what we do is we identify, evaluate, manage, and conserve rock art both in Alta California and in Baja California. We conduct field trips, we have trainings, exercise, we do research, and in every way possible, we try to preserve, protect, and coordinate treasures of Alta and Baja California rock art, of which there are many and diverse. We also work closely with Native Americans and partner with them to recognize and protect sacred sites. So for more info about the fabulous California Rock Art Foundation, you can go to carockart.org. Also, I'm open to give me a call, 805-312-2261. We would welcome sponsorship or underwriting, helping us to defray the costs of our podcasts, and also membership in California Rock Art Foundation. And of course, donation, since we are a 501c3 nonprofit scientific and educational corporation. God bless everyone out there in podcast land.
You're listening to the Rock Art Podcast. Join us every week for fascinating tales of rock art, adventure, and archaeology. Find our contact info in the show notes and send us your suggestions.
Hello out there in Archaeology Podcast land. This is your host, Dr. Alan Garfinkel. I'd like to introduce episode 52 of the Rock Art Podcast. Jose Botello, who's indigenous himself and hails from Mexico, talking about the ethnobotanicals and this ethnobotanical research, the plants that are used for altered states of consciousness, and also shamanism and the realm of syncretism, where native religion meets the religion of Christianity as well. Interesting episode, gang. Well, welcome to episode 52. This is your host, Dr. Alan Garfinkel Gold, and this is your Rock Art Podcast on the Archaeology Podcast Network. And we're blessed and honored to have Jose Botello as our honored guest scholar. He's an anthropologist, student, a graduate student, and one who's been researching relationships between ethnobotanicals, plants, native plants, and also their various uses in ritual and symbolism, and also their psychoactive qualities by individuals involved as Indian doctors and those that are called shamans and ritual adepts. Hi, Jose. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. It's been a while since we've had a chance to chat and discuss some of this. Maybe you could explain kind of who you are and how you got involved with this rather interesting, we call it esoteric, but a very specialized and a bit different way of thinking in the realm of anthropology, cultural and social anthropology, the study of ethnobotany, and its relationship to some of those disciplines that we have a great interest in, ritual, ceremony, native curing.
But yeah, I would love to, like Dr. Gold said, my name is Jose Botello, and I was born in a small pueblo called Mazatán in Nayarit, Mexico. And Mazatán translates, it's a Nahuatl word, which translates to the land of the deer. I am a graduate student in the Master's of Anthropology program at Cal State University of Northridge. And throughout my undergraduate career, my research focused mainly on psychoactive and ritually significant plants and their uses in Native American cosmologies and worldviews. So now as a graduate student, I'm continuing my research in ethnobotany, in hopes to contribute to the understanding of the roles that all these ethnogenic plants played in the indigenous societies of the Americas.
What are ethnogenic plants, Jose? What does that mean?
Entheogenic plants, yes. It's basically means plants that connect you to God or the theo. So it's psychedelic plants.
So these are plants that sometimes are used by Indian doctors or even shamans, and they're used to, I guess, create or attain some altered states of consciousness so that the native people, the ritualist can connect with the supernatural. Is that correct, Jose?
That is correct.
Yeah. Well, that's fascinating. That's sort of an interesting niche unto itself. Please continue.
Yeah, so my other research interests, theories of material cultural, oral histories, ethnographic and archaeological fieldwork. And I also enjoy transcribing and translating unpublished archival materials that can help me determine the function of all these various plants in cultural contexts. And that's pretty much what my interests are in anthropology and ethnobotany.
How does your background growing up in Mexico and in a pueblo relate to your current sort of effort at being an academic and studying in the field of anthropology? Can you paint us a picture of what it was like and perhaps a bit of background about your early years in that pueblo?
Growing up, I was always, around my family. I grew up there. I spent years going back and forth. My pueblo, we retained a lot of our indigenous practices, also mixed in with the Catholic ones, but we still maintained a lot of our cultural background. I always grew up interested in just natural medicines with curanderismo, the medicine doctors that we had there. We were pretty isolated from the bigger cities, so we really had to take care of ourselves out there and find ways to better ourselves, medicinally or spiritually. And that always really captivated me.
Did you have individuals that you met or knew who were curers or doctors or people that anthropologists might call shamans?
There were specific people in the pueblo that specialized in different areas. So there would be, someone that would know how to work with just plants. There would be like a bone setter for physical injuries, somebody that knew the body physically. And there would be other people, for spiritual cleansing and other aspects of curanderismo. So there were a few people that were known in the pueblo that specialized in all these different aspects.
What sort of ceremonies, rituals, or associated activities relate back, I guess, to either the Catholic Church or maybe even the native Indian ways of thinking that were developed in your village?
So our death rituals and our death ceremonies, I actually wrote a paper on this. There's a lot of syncretism in our death and our death rituals. So, we have the Catholic aspects. When somebody dies in our pueblo, they are taken to the Catholic temple where they're venerated, where they're prayed upon. And we also have our indigenous aspects where, the burning of copal to clean the area where the body is at. We place an ash cross under the coffin that symbolizes, again, the Catholic side, but it also symbolizes the 4 cardinal directions. After the body is buried, there's a time, 9 days, where the deceased family members pray 9 days continuously to sort of rid the area of the pollutants, I guess you can say, of the deceased.
And were there any other ceremonies or rituals, feast days that were celebrated through your growing up in Pueblo in terms of native days, or those that were part of the general, I guess, hybridization or interfingering of native religion and the Catholic Church?
Yes. So there's actually something going on right now in our Pueblo. They are venerating they call it the Virgen of Natividad, the Virgin of Nativity.
What is that?
So we start August 26th, I want to say. From August 26th to September 8th, we do different things every day.
Mm-hmm.
So throughout these festivities, we're venerating the Virgin of Nativity that's from our Pueblo.
Okay.
What they do is every day they bring out the Virgin and they parade her around the whole Pueblo.
Is this a doll? Is this a sculpture? What is the Virgin?
Yes, she is a sculpture.
Okay.
She's a sculpture, and they claim to have found her in the jungles back in the 1500s when the Pueblo was established.
Okay. And when was the Pueblo established?
I've done some research, and I found I got in contact with the professor down in Compostela, Nayarit.
Okay.
And he allowed me to to look at some parochial archives, and there was a map showing the my pueblo, and the map was dated to 1523, I want to say.
Oh, my word.
So we have evidence of the pueblo being there.
So it goes back many centuries.
Yes, and it still hasn't really changed much. So every day, like I said, we do different activities. On one of the days, there's a greased pole that we climb.
Okay.
I think I remember telling you this.
Yes.
There's a large pole that's greased up.
Okay, and why do you climb the greased pole?
Because there's prizes on top. And it's just, a way to get the community together, the pueblo together.
Sure.
And it's like these village games that we do to celebrate,
And it's very, very difficult to climb up that greased pole, correct?
The main ceremony that we do during these times is there's a pilgrimage that we do that everybody, whoever wants to participate, men, women, children can participate as well. They take a torch and run all the way to Tepic, Nayarit, which is like an hour and a half drive. And they run all the way there with a lit torch. And it's just all the people from my pueblo. And they do this every year. So it's carrying the lit torch there to the peak, and then they run it back.
And what does that represent?
So what I found is it represented the uniting of the indigenous pueblos. So they would stop at every pueblo on the way there and on the way back.
And the mountain that they go to, does that have some significance as well?
Actually, it's the peak it's the city.
Okay, I see.
Yeah, it's city, the peak, Nayarit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so they run there to the Catholic temple. Now they run to the Catholic temple there to the peak, and then they run all the way back.
Are there any indigenous places, Indian places, that still figure into these ceremonies or festivals that are independent of the Catholic places, or no?
I mean, I guess you can say the whole pueblo.
Okay.
When they're walking the statue of the Virgin Mary around, everybody brings offerings. Offerings of corn, offerings of gifts, offerings of drinks. So, there's that aspect.
So that harkens back to the original types of activities that were done in pre-European times, correct?
Yes.
Well, that takes us through the first segment, and in the next segment, let's drill down a little bit further and see if we can begin talking about maybe some of the knowledge that you've gleaned with respect to these ethogens and plants, healing plants, and other plants that are used for entering or connecting with the world of the supernatural and more religious orders. See you in the flip-flop, gang. Thank you.
Chris Webster here for the Archaeology Podcast Network. We strive for high-quality interviews and content so you can find information on any topic in archaeology from around the world. One way we do that is by recording interviews with our hosts and guests located in many parts of the world all at once. We do that through the use of Zencastr. That's Zencastr. Zencastr allows us to record high-quality audio with no stress on the guest. Just send them a link to click on, and that's it. Zencastr does the rest. They even do automatic transcriptions. Check out the link in the show notes for 30% off your first 3 months, or go to zencastr.com and use the code ROCKART. Looking to expand your knowledge of X-rays and imaging in the archaeology field? Then check out An Introduction to Paleoradiography, a short online course offering professional training for archaeologists and affiliated disciplines. Created by archaeologist, radiographer, and lecturer James Elliott, the content of this course is based upon his research and teaching experience in higher education. It is approved by the Chartered Institute for Archaeologists as 4 hours of training. That's in the UK, for those of you that don't know. So don't miss out on this exciting opportunity for professional and personal development. For more information on pricing and course structure, visit paleoimaging.com. That's PALEO imaging.com, and look for the link in the show notes to this episode.
Welcome back to the Rock Art Podcast. This is your host, Dr. Alan Garfinkel, and we're here for episode 52 with the Rock Art Podcast on your Archaeology Podcast Network. And we have a wonderful guest scholar, Jose Botello. And Jose is sharing his background, his upbringing, and his expertise in the field of anthropology, archaeology, comparative understanding of religion, and most important, ethnobotanical studies that he's done, plants relating to the use of those plants and medicinal properties, and how those relate back to Indian doctors, shamans, and other individuals that are ritualists, and how they use those plants to perhaps gain a look into the cosmos and connect with the supernatural. Jose, how are you?
I'm doing great, Dr. Garfinkel. How are you doing?
Thanks so much for coming on board and sharing your knowledge and your background. Shall we delve a bit deeper into the ethnobotanical realm?
Yes, let's do it.
Give us a peek on your research and what it really involved in terms of understanding the native use of plants by the American Indians.
For my undergraduate research, I got awarded a research grant to the Students Research Scholars Program. And me and my professor, Patrick O'Neill, decided to do an ethnobotanical monograph for the Tubal Labo, the natives of the Southern Sierra Nevadas. So what I did was I recorded the traditional uses of plants according to living Tubal Labo tribe members, their oral histories, and I supplemented that with ethnographic and archaeological literature. So I produced a botanical collection with full documentation, inventory, and metadata, and I collected plant specimens for identification and curation at the Laboratory of Archaeological Sciences at Cal State Bakersfield. I assigned taxonomic attributes and indigenous vernaculars to these plants as well.
And what did you discover from that kind of research? Which plants were perhaps the most interesting or had the most compelling stories? And which ones did you find to be most engaging and perhaps important to Native people?
Datura rhytii was a really interesting plant that they used because it was known as the sacred datura around here, or toloache was what they called it. This plant was used to connect to the supernatural, and what many natives around here used it for was for rites of passages and the coming of age ceremonies for men. So what they did was they would go out on these journeys by themselves and take this plant, Datura rhytii, and embark on a spiritual journey.
What parts of the plants are psychoactive?
The whole part of it is psychoactive. The seeds, the leaves, the flowers, and the roots especially.
And how would they prepare to use that plant? What sort of methods when would they harvest it? What plant parts would they use? What would they have to prepare it or process it in any way?
Most of the time it was washed and just eating raw. They would make a poultice as well with the roots by smashing the roots up and making a drink out of it.
And then when they had these coming of age rites, how would that be handled? Who would administer those rites, and what age would those men be given that opportunity to sort of go through this initiation ceremony? There
wasn't really a specific age. It was just when they felt it was necessary.
So tell us a bit about the ceremony for Datura use and what goes on. When do the young men are involved with this? Who administers that ceremony? What do they do? What do they experience? How many days does it take, etc.? What's kind of the way to understand the use of Datura from your research and investigations?
So a toloache shaman would prepare and administer the sacred medicine. So there's a combination of the plant's leaves, flowers, and roots that were processed with a special toloache pestle and mortar, and they were boiled together to make a tea.
Oh, really? Okay.
And also there's a mandatory 3-day fast before consumption.
What is the particular young person experience from ingesting that plant?
So Datura is a deliriant. So on the third day, the participants of the ceremony who drink the tea, they fell into a 12-hour state of an altered consciousness. So it would be like an out-of-body experience.
Wow.
Yes.
12 hours.
And the purpose of the ceremony was to lift the veil between dimensions and search for a lifelong animal spirit guide.
Oh, my word. So this is a very strong and very extensive and transformational experience, I would imagine.
Yes, very.
That the individuals that experienced this would have been rather transformed, and it would have made an enormous impression upon them to experience such a dramatic ceremony, I would believe, correct?
Yes, correct. And very dangerous as well, because you can overdose with the material and it will be deadly.
So they had to be extremely knowledgeable about the brew and how it's done and how to administer it and how to make sure that the young men that were involved with this ceremony were handling it properly and were reassured at the right way and that conducted the ceremony with the right kinds of actions and reactions, I would presume. That's fascinating. And what other plants or other kinds of elements within your ethnobotanical studies were of great interest to you?
So another plant that we found interesting was the wild cucumber.
And how was that processed and what was that used for?
So the wild cucumber, it's a large tuberous vining plant that is native to California and also native to this area as well.
Okay.
It's also called the man root because of the tuberous taproot system that it has. And it played a huge role in puberty rites and passage ceremonies within the Native American groups, not just the ones here of Kern County as well. So it was a puberty ceremony for young girls, which involved, the actual wild cucumber and also a porous stone called the tosat. I hope I'm pronouncing that the right way, but
okay.
So they used the stone in combination with the wild cucumber. And these stones are said to come from the ocean and are kept by the tribal chiefs. And then the elder woman is chosen to lead the ceremony and is granted access to the stone. So the wild cucumber, they gather the seed pods that are produced by the plant and boiled into a concoction, making a better tea. And then the stone is placed inside a basket of hot water while the girls stand around it. So before the stone is removed, the participants of the ceremony wait until the stone starts to gurgle and sing. And then after a basket containing the bitter tea is then placed on top of the hot water, and then it's ready to be consumed after that.
I know that in some parts of California with other groups that are at least distantly related to the groups from the far Southern Sierras, there were women's coming of age ceremonies that related to painting of certain imagery of the rattlesnake with a series of diamonds or triangles or etc., where they ran to a rock and then they would do this. They were mainly Takic instead of just Numic or Uto-Aztecan themselves. But it sounds like that this coming of age ceremony might have some distant connections and similarities between that kind of activity. Am I correct?
Yeah, I would think so.
So that's interesting. Any other kinds of interesting ceremonies or elements, discoveries that you feel were compelling and had and surprising to you, Jose, with respect to the use of the plants? They could be for pigment or binders. They could be used in paint. Perhaps they could be used in other ways, or maybe just they were part of the nature of the subsistence, the diet. I would think that certain key plants were just recognized for their value as edibles, correct?
Yes.
Which plants were, of course, maybe the mainstay for some of those groups that you were studying? Are there particular plants that you think were staples or ones that had greater importance for the diet of the native people?
I mean, the usual staple, plant in California would be the acorn.
So which species of acorns were the most preferred? Were they the black oak, Quercus collogiae, or were there other species who were more preferred? And what about the pinyon pine? Was that part of the repertoire of the native people that you'd had discovered and analyzed and studied?
Oh yes, the gray pine nuts were used a lot, especially in combination with tobacco.
I see. Yes, native tobacco was a cultigen. It was almost a domesticated plant, wasn't it?
Yes, they would selectively start breeding the tobacco for bigger leaves. They would start cultivating it themselves. Yes,
I see.
And there were two species of wild tobacco that were used there.
And wasn't that also used in some sort of a way to, as an altered state of consciousness by native medicine persons as well?
Yes, smoking and chewing.
Okay. Well, that's about all we have time for at this point for the second segment. Maybe in this last segment, we'll try to drill down to some case studies and some of the actual hands-on efforts that Jose worked on in his research. See you on the flip-flop, gang.
You may have heard my pitch for membership. It's a great idea and really helps out. However, you can also support us by picking up a fun t-shirt, sticker, or something from a large selection of items from our TeePublic store. Head over to ArchPodNet.com/shop for a link. That's ArchPodNet.com/shop to pick up some fun swag and support the show.
Hello out there in Archaeology, Rock Art Podcast land. This is your host, Dr. Alan Garfinkel, with Jose Botello, talking about ethnobotany, indigenous cosmology, and the nature of some of his investigations as a grad student and as a native from the Pueblo in Mexico. Let's try to talk about something that interests you, a passion and a discovery that you are interested in pursuing vis-a-vis your initial studies in the world of ethnography and ethnobotany. Go ahead, Jose. The floor is yours.
What really interests me is the use of incense, smoke, and ritual.
Fantastic.
White sage, it's one of the most widely used medicinal and ceremonial plants by Native American groups, across North America.
And that's salvia, isn't it?
Yes. Salvia apiana.
Okay. And so that is the sage that they use when they burn as incense, as a purifier, and one that we see used extensively, probably through much of the Americas, right?
Yes, it's used pretty much everywhere. Yes, the burning. It's mostly used for burning, but it's also it contains antibacterial and antioxidant properties that make it one of the most powerful herbs to fight ailments such as bacterial infections, sore throats, sinus congestion, and stomach indigestion.
So it's a powerful plant for healing as well as for purification and ritual use. How is it used ritually? Help me.
So it's burned. So the burning of sage, it's a common ceremony. It's considered one of the most sacred plants. So the burning of its leaves produce sacred smoke that cleanses and purifies living spaces.
And that's what they call smudging, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, and
that's correct.
I know that when I went to a creation site with Native people, they would burn the sage, and we'd all get smudged. They would cover us with the smoke from head to toe, and that would purify us and also show respect for the place that we visited. And we visited a rock art site and a creation site of the Native people of the far Southern Sierra. These were what's called Kawayasu. They were Southern Paiute. We participated in a smudging ceremony through that. Is that something akin to what you're talking about?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm talking about. And also, the act of prayer is almost always combined with the burning of sage, because it is believed that prayers are transformed into the white smoke that is produced from the sage. And it's important because by transforming prayer into smoke, the prayers are able to travel through the sky and up into the cosmos. Yes.
Let me share some. I'm going to piggyback. I don't know what you have to say. I know through my own studies on what they call Uto-Aztecan cosmology, which would be certainly the people that you hail from, that smoke the white smoke, as it elevates and goes into the heavens, is perceived as holy or sacred for a variety of reasons, isn't it?
Yes,
And why is that?
because your prayers, your intentions are being transformed and delivered into the heavens, into the other realm. So it's like you're directly sending your prayers and intentions into the supernatural world.
So as smoke rises and goes to the heavens, so your prayers sort of piggyback on that same transportation, correct?
Correct. Prayers and intentions.
Tell me a bit more about sage. I'm fascinated, please.
Like I said, it's also a really, really good medicine. I use it myself for, when I feel a cold coming on. I brew it into a tea. I usually smash it, grind it in with the mortar and pestle, and make a tea out of it. And it's a really good medicine for infections, for sore throats, and all that type of all those type of ailments.
Well, wonderful. So it sounds like it has many different meanings, all unified in a remarkable plant. I know it has a tremendous smell, doesn't it? It's sort of an overwhelming aromatic smell when you burn it and when you smell it. And it's kind of a beautiful smell, isn't it?
Oh, yes. I love the smell of it, yeah.
I know when I travel into the desert west, the sage, that when you smell it or grind it or put it in your hands, it has that beautiful aromatic quality. I also know that that the white smoke, the smoke, as it goes to the heavens, is of course seen as akin to the other realm. That's this color white is perceived as a holy color. Have you run across that as well?
Yes, I have, especially with the white eagle feathers.
Okay, tell me.
So, like you said, the color white, it's akin to the heavens. And as far as eagle feathers, they're the highest of flying of the birds. They're considered sacred because they're able to fly next to the cosmos, next to the heavens.
So with those white feathers,
yes.
And this is also a white sage. So I guess the sage you're talking about in itself, does it look white or is it light in color?
It is light in color, and it does have a white film to the leaves, a whitish gray.
Mm-hmm. And I didn't realize that. I didn't realize that there was a white sage or this whitish gray color that also is associated with this plant. But that's fascinating. Absolutely. So you get the white sage, you get the smoke, which of course is white. You get the white feathers of the eagles, and this is all associated with the celestial realm, the most holiest area, the highest of elevations, and the realm of the supernatural. What would you want to inform the listeners of the podcast, most importantly, from both your Native American and anthropological background about the nature of your research? What is its significance to them, and what's the message that you receive from doing the work that you do, and why does it motivate you to do that? What should they have learned from listening to this podcast, and what do you think they need to know about the nature of the natural world, the plants, the animals, and the things that you've learned?
The ethnobotany, it's important because, certain plants that are used by these indigenous cultures might contain, properties, alkaloids, or compounds that are forgotten or unknown by modern society. There's a lot of that we can still learn from all these plants. Different medicines are always coming out. A lot of the medicines that we have are because of ethnobotanical research.
So there's the realm of discovery, correct?
Yes.
And potential discoveries from studying the plants could help in terms of various pharmaceuticals, healing properties. I know that these days they are now using some of the psychoactive plants to help people transform their lives and heal from some very debilitating diseases, including those that are mental health issues from severe depression and other things along those lines. And it happens to be very, very effective. You've heard about that, haven't you?
Oh, yes, and I completely agree. This ethnobotanical research is opening the doors for the research on psychedelic drugs, on mental health. The psychedelic mushrooms, psilocybe cubensis, peyote, lophophora williamsii, all these medicines are proving to be of great help with mental health.
And even besides that, people who are severely depressed, or in fact, in some cases, have diseases that modern medicine cannot seem to cure and are given a death sentence. We had one gentleman who's a neuroscientist who had cancer throughout his body and went to South America to visit with the shamans and was cured of cancer from using the altered states of consciousness, ethnobotanicals, and came back completely healthy. And this kind of work is now much more common than it's ever been before.
Yes, I agree.
Well, I guess that's all we have time for tonight. Jose, thanks so much for putting up with us and contributing your knowledge and perspective to the world of the Archaeology podcast and Rock Art podcast, episode 52. Can you imagine? What a concept. God bless you, Jose. See you on the Flip Flop Gang next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Rock Art Podcast with Dr. Alan Garfinkel and Chris Webster. Find show notes and contact information at www.archpodnet.com/rockart. Thanks for listening, and thanks for sharing this podcast with your family and friends. This episode was produced by Chris Webster from his RV Traveling America, Tristan Boyle in Scotland, and the Archaeology Podcast Network, and was edited by Chris Webster.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.archpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.
Thanks again for listening to this episode and for supporting the Archaeology Podcast Network. If you want these shows to keep going, consider becoming a member for just $7.99 US a month. That's cheaper than a venti quad eggnog latte. Go to archpodnet.com/members for more info.